Hello, everyone. This is Kuroiwa from Alpha College. Today, we're bringing you the ultimate guide to dominating interviews at foreign investment banks, foreign affiliated companies, asset management firms, and hedge funds. So, right now in Japan, it's Golden Week. It's May. But even so, there's been a huge increase in things like boss carry and also consultations from people in the class of 2028 going through domestic selection. These have really been increasing, so I thought it would be a good time to address this topic now. So, I'm planning to review and explain how to secure a job offer in foreign finance, kind of like a summary. Basically, if you watch this one video, you'll be able to fully understand how to get a job offer, everything you need to know. That's the kind of vibe we're going for, so I really hope you'll check it out. Let's get ready together so you can land that job offer. Make sure to watch this video all the way to the end. As for alpha, we're talking about places like Goldman, BlackRock, and Point72. These places, where the annual salary is over 20 or 30 million yen, are producing a lot of successful candidates. So I'm sure many of you are aiming to get in there. That goes for both the buy side and the sell side in finance. Since they're producing a lot of successful candidates, today I'd like to talk about this kind of thing. Based on that, I'd like to explain again today what kind of people are landing job offers and what kind of preparation those who are succeeding are actually doing. So, whether you're just about to start your job search or things haven't been going so well for you so far, that's what they say. Things are going well on the other side too, but in the end, foreign banks, investment banks, hedging, I received a job offer from a fund. There are also people who want to take it. I hope you'll watch until the very end. Yeah, so I'm interesting. If you're interested, please feel free to contact us for a free consultation. My background is as follows. I studied at Waseda University, then studied abroad at Holt, and have experience working at a major Japanese asset management company, then a foreign hedge fund, specifically a US hedge fund, where I worked as an equity analyst in Boston. So I have experience in foreign finance in general, but I think I'm particularly knowledgeable about the buy side. I provide support for job hunting and career changes, of course, but also for financial technical skills, including investment, analysis, modeling, how to create LBO models, and how to create stock pitches. So if you're not very confident in your financial knowledge right now, please feel free to contact us. I'm very interested in this, so please feel free to contact us. As a side note, recently we've seen a significant increase in applications for financial technical skills from first and second year university students, which I think is amazing. I'm always impressed by their excellent information acumen and enjoy supporting them. I'm providing guidance, and if you come to Alpha in your first or second year of university, I think you'll have a landslide victory in securing a job at investment banks, asset management, and hedge funds like the ones I'll be introducing today. So I hope you'll come as early as possible. It's much easier for us if you come early because we can support you from the beginning. So I'll be explaining that a bit today, so please watch until the end. All of today's materials are in English, but the explanation itself will be in Japanese, so thank you in advance. The financial industry is booming right now, and I think you all know that because Ilusumi explains it almost every day on Alpha's main channel. But Japan in particular is experiencing an unprecedented financial boom, and that applies to both selling and buying. It's really booming, and I think there are some university students and others who don't know what's happening, so I'll explain it again. To explain what's happening in simple terms, foreign investors are buying up Japanese company stocks like crazy. And it's not just stocks, they're also snapping up Japanese assets like real estate because they're considered extremely undervalued right now. That's why there's a rush. For example, Warren Buffett famously bought shares of Japanese trading companies. And there's also been a lot of excitement around Tokyo Marine, with investors buying up their stock. Plus, although it's a bit older news, Fuji TV was a huge topic, right? Activist funds like Dalton have been buying up Japanese stocks more and more. What these activist funds do, unlike regular hedge funds, is not just buy stocks and wait for the price to go up. Activists buy stocks and don't just sit back, they actively get involved in the company's governance and management. Specifically, they might demand higher dividends, push for share buybacks, insist on more investment in certain businesses, or, on the flip side, call for cost cutting in certain areas. By doing this, the stock price naturally goes up, which attracts even more foreign investors. As a result, the stock price rises even more and more foreign investors come in. This is the current trend. Because these investors are putting pressure on management as shareholders and getting involved in the company's direction, we're seeing a huge increase in M&A activity. Plus, things like fundraising and corporate bond issuance are also extremely active. If you're a student who's pretty tuned in, you might have noticed, for example, that Rakuten issued bonds or that SoftBank has. I think you'll also pick up on news like companies issuing corporate bonds, and M&A is booming right now, both buying and selling. So investment banks are making a lot of money, both in the capital markets and in M&A. Of course, there are a lot of buy sides as well. BlackRock, for example, has pretty much bought up all of Japan's stocks and will probably continue to buy more. It's not just so-called passive funds that are getting involved, but as I mentioned earlier, activist funds are also getting in. So both the sell side and buy side are really booming. So the Japanese financial industry is incredibly hot right now. Therefore, I highly recommend the financial industry. It's very simple. You can make money, you can earn a lot of money, and the work is interesting. So I highly recommend it. I hope that talented students will aim for the financial industry. You can go into investment banking, for example, become a trader within investment banking, do M&A, do capital markets, or if you're on the buy side, go to BlackRock, a hedge fund, or do asset management. If you break it down into very fine details, it's something like that. But the financial industry is highly specialized, so I don't think there's anyone who doesn't fit in. For example, in a trading company, you need to be able to communicate to a certain extent, or you need to be a key person to fit in, but that's not the case in the financial industry. So even if you're not good at communication, there's definitely a position that suits you, whether you're someone who communicates with people a lot and takes on leadership roles. So I think it's good to challenge yourself without thinking things like, because of my personality, finance won't suit me, or it's too demanding, so it'll be difficult, based on stereotypes, prejudices, or preconceptions. I especially want to convey that Japan is a great place to start. So, we understand that the financial industry is very attractive, but how do you get in? That's the main topic of today's discussion, and this applies not only to the financial industry, but to all companies. And the process of getting in is divided into two stages. First, let's understand that. Step one is the first. In the first stage, what they're looking at is your minimum qualifications. These qualifications are judged based on things like your documents or your entry sheet, ES. Honestly, if you don't make it past this stage, no matter who you are, you won't be able to get a job offer. So you really need to make sure your qualifications are solid. At the beginning, I mentioned that if you come to Alpha from your first or second year of college, it's much easier to get a job offer, and this is the reason why. For example, if you come to us around your third year of college, at the time when you're applying for summer internships, it's pretty tough to improve your qualifications at that point. Like, if you haven't studied abroad yet, we might say, you should study abroad. Or if you can't speak English, you should go study abroad. Or if you haven't been studying for the entrance exams, you should start. To put it more bluntly, in Japan, if you don't go to a top school like the University of Tokyo, Waseda, Keio, or internationally, places like Harvard, Yale, MIT, the Ivy League, or liberal arts colleges, honestly, it's going to be tough. So, above all else, it's really important to make sure you have these qualifications. Most students just don't have these qualifications. The main reason is that most of them can't really speak English. Even for people who get into the University of Tokyo, for example, it's tough for them to communicate in English. Doing business in English is difficult. For example, investment banking. In that case, it's hard to hold meetings in English and move projects forward. So, no matter how talented they are, if they can't do that, they just can't do the job. That's the reality. So, first and foremost, you need to acquire this skill set if you want to work in investment banking, or you need to have the kind of skills that asset management firms and hedge funds are looking for. Acquiring those skills is the very first step. So, for example, one of those things would be English proficiency, or maybe having specialized knowledge or quantitative skills, a science or engineering background. People with those kinds of backgrounds are really in demand, so it's important to make sure you actively pursue those areas. But what if, for example, you haven't studied abroad? Or honestly, if you're in a major that's totally unrelated to finance, For people like that, even if they suddenly start job hunting, you'll probably get cut at the first stage, the screening step. So don't force it. It's important to make sure you properly acquire these qualifications. Specifically, most people actually don't have study abroad experience. So the conversation usually turns to recommending studying abroad. And what I especially recommend are finance related programs. And here it says hedge fund as an example, but this is the same for investment banks as well. So, when it comes to investment banks, they're basically foreign financial institutions, right? Overall, it's not just specialized knowledge in finance that's important, they also really look for, or rather prefer, people with a background in the sciences. So, surprisingly, in finance, or rather compared to economics majors, people from science and engineering backgrounds, or computer science, actually tend to get more job offers. I hope you'll keep that in mind. For example, something that's become really popular lately is financial engineering. Schools like Carnegie Mellon, MIT, Columbia, and recently, places in Singapore like SMU, NTU, and NUS are all very popular. I highly recommend these institutions. As for American programs, Carnegie Mellon is without a doubt one of the top choices. It's truly the pinnacle for quantitative finance if you're aiming for hedge funds, the buy side, or trading at foreign financial institutions. Programs like Carnegie Mellon's are absolutely the best. Actually, I had the wonderful opportunity to observe a class at Carnegie Mellon during a recent campus visit, and I must say, the students were exceptionally gifted and remarkably talented. The professors there had highly distinguished and impressive academic credentials, and the admissions staff were incredibly friendly and welcoming. They were always more than happy to introduce me to various people at Alpha, so if you are genuinely interested in taking on this kind of challenge, please do not hesitate to contact me. MIT offers a Master of Finance program, but you can essentially think of it as a program in financial engineering. For example, MIT is primarily a technology school, and believe it or not, the entire field of financial engineering actually originated at MIT. You might have heard of the firm Long Term Capital Management, but essentially, it is a hedge fund comprised of quantitative specialists with two Nobel laureates in economics joining together to form what many called a dream team. Most of the people working in that kind of environment at Long Term Capital were actually MIT graduates. This is a bit of an old story now, but what I am trying to say is that it remains one of the absolute top schools in the world for finance and quantitative financial engineering. So I highly recommend looking into MIT, and best of all, you do not even need to take the GRE or TOEFL exams there. In other words, you can submit your application without taking a standardized test, which is a truly remarkable and significant competitive advantage. So it would be absolutely great to go to a prestigious place like this. That is my brief introduction to MIT. Also, surprisingly, there are more and more schools that no longer require these tests, especially in the field of finance. But I think there are quite a few people who still think that you absolutely have to get a high score on the GRE or study for the TOEFL for more than a year to get into a top tier school. But that is not actually the case anymore. Columbia, which I will introduce next, also accepts students through Duolingo, which is an English test app that some of you may have seen featuring the little green bird. There are more and more test-friendly schools like this appearing every day, so I truly hope you will challenge yourselves without any form of hesitation or unnecessary doubt. Talking about the specifics of how to get accepted into graduate school would likely take another hour or so I will skip those details today. But to put it simply, your essays are incredibly important, so please feel free to consult with Alpha about this process. As for Columbia, since it's based in New York, a lot of graduates land jobs at investment banks and funds. Other schools to consider include NYU, Yale, and Chicago. Chicago also has a finance program that's only been around for 2 or 3 years. So I think the best options are schools on the East Coast that offer these kinds of programs. Now, you might be wondering about Singapore. Singapore is excellent when it comes to financial engineering. Programs like quantitative finance and financial engineering at SMU and NTU are outstanding. So I highly recommend financial engineering there. SMU, as you probably already know, is a school we've introduced many times at Alpha. It's located right in the heart of the city, and recruiters from places like Jane Street come to campus for recruiting events. So it's a school that's extremely strong when it comes to job placement. NTU refers to Nanyang Technological University. To put it simply, it's kind of like an NIT. It's more of a tech school than a finance school, so it's a university that's really strong in technology. What's great about programs like this is that, of course, they're extremely strong academically. That's definitely one of their strengths. But they also offer exchange programs with Carnegie Mellon. There are also Alpha students who have been accepted and gone to this program. So, since there are opportunities like this, I highly recommend NTU as well. As for NUS, it's not just Alpha students either. We've had successful applicants there too. It's kind of like the University of Tokyo in Japan. It's the #1 school in Singapore. So that's the kind of place we're talking about. That's why I highly recommend schools in Singapore as well. At Alpha, we've had a lot of successful applicants. These are just a few examples, but even so, these kinds of programs are highly recommended, so definitely give them a try. If you're wondering which schools would be best for you, please feel free to consult individually with an Alpha advisor. For example, you might be in a certain situation and aiming for a particular school, but really just feel free to reach out and say something like, I'm thinking about choosing this kind of school. We can give you advice on those points as well, so university students are also welcome to consult with us. We hope you'll get in touch with us. These are the kinds of qualifications that are getting accepted. I've studied abroad, I have a pretty good academic background, and things like that. It means I've really studied things like finance and tech thoroughly. Okay, so next, let's move on to the application process. From here on out, it's really all about the fit assessment. Of course, each company has its own unique characteristics, but generally speaking, it's the same for investment banks, asset management firms, and hedge funds. The points they look at are actually very similar, and the process is similar as well. Specifically, things like your resume, or for assessment screenings, higher view, and if it's a hedge fund, then a stock pitch. This doesn't apply if it's investment banking. Plus, at the end, there's an interview, and then comes the internship. That's the general flow. So, yeah, for many of you, that's probably how it goes. Let me go through the steps and explain a bit, starting from the beginning. So, first is the document screening, just like I mentioned earlier. Basically, all of your qualifications are evaluated during this document screening. So, at this point, you might start to wonder about yourself. If your qualifications aren't up to par, you'll be filtered out at this stage. So you need to make sure you can get through this document and qualification screening. So make sure you have all your credentials in order, like your academic background and study abroad experience. That's what it comes down to. Assuming you've successfully cleared that initial hurdle, your very next step in the process is going to be the higher view. So what exactly is higher view? It is basically a specialized digital video interview platform where you record your personal answers to preset questions and then send them in for review. There are a few different formats you might encounter, but generally speaking, it is a one-take recording session. And lately, there has been a really big increase in candidates having to answer every single question in English. Furthermore, the questions themselves also seem to be getting a whole lot tougher than they used to be. For example, up until about 5 years ago or so, the questions were usually pretty basic and straightforward, like why do you want this specific job? Or why are you interested in this company? Or could you tell us about a past leadership experience? But recently, for instance, in a very recent investment banking interview, the question was much more complex. You have a high stakes meeting with the CFO in exactly 3 days. You will only have 10 minutes for the entire meeting. What specific steps would you take to prepare yourself during those 3 days? Or another one was, if you could only ask 3 questions to the executive, what would you ask? So as you can see, there are a lot more highly specific and challenging questions like that being used now. These are what we call behavioral questions, essentially asking what exactly would you do in this specific situation? And it really feels like these kinds of analytical questions are coming up more and more frequently. Also, for example, another very common one that we see quite often is, for example, a common question is, a colleague did something that isn't illegal or against the rules. But it's not ethically right. You're the only one who knows about it. What would you do? Questions like that come up quite a bit. There isn't really a single right answer to these kinds of complex questions, is there? It's not like there's just one specific correct response that everyone is looking for. So, because of that, you'll often find yourself being asked things like, what exactly would you do if you were in this specific situation? Now, Alpha certainly has a lot of past HireVue interview questions available, but lately it's become much more common to get questions that aren't in those past question banks at all. Basically, questions you haven't prepared for in advance. That's exactly why I feel like your true self, your real personality, really comes out in these moments, since you simply can't just rely on rote preparation to cover everything. Also, you should keep in mind that everything is conducted in English now. Especially recently, more and more of these interviews are conducted entirely in English from start to finish. So if you can't present yourself well and fluently in English, it's honestly going to be quite tough. So, if you make common mistakes like the ones listed right here, like just memorizing a script and reading it out loud, you'll probably end up failing. Since these are AI-driven interviews, for example, if you look away from the screen, or if your eyes wander around, or if your voice sounds shaky and you don't seem confident, you'll get points taken off just for that. It's actually pretty strict when you think about it. The strategies for HireVue and traditional in-person interviews are totally different from one another, so this part is honestly pretty challenging for most people. That's basically the core of what you need to know before the interview starts. Next up is the stock pitch. So, what exactly is a stock pitch? It's basically the entire process of creating a detailed investment report. In short, when I say investment report, what I really mean is it's not just about thoroughly reviewing investor relations materials and summarizing them. You also have to do things like complex financial modeling and detailed company valuation. So, it's actually pretty tough. Some of you might have heard of things like the DCF method, beta, WACC, or CAPM, but when you're actually asked to use those to do evaluation, or to build a model in Excel, or to create a balance sheet for 5 years in the future, can you really do that? That's where it gets pretty challenging, I think. So I strongly recommend that you dedicate a significant amount of your time and effort to preparing for this. This is actually my specific area of expertise. So if you want to know how to build a model or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me for guidance. Through our comprehensive Alpha Support's financial technical support system, we teach you absolutely everything you need to know, including how to study effectively, how to analyze data deeply, and all the specific methods required for success. So, if you're interested in this, please reach out and let us know. However, it is important to note that this kind of technical preparation is basically not required for most roles at investment banks. On the other hand, for positions in asset management or at hedge funds, this knowledge is often strictly required. Sometimes you will find yourself being grilled intensely in interviews based specifically on this kind of technical work. That is exactly why it is so important to be able to create a professional stock pitch backed by solid logical reasoning. Only after successfully passing this rigorous stage do you finally get the chance to move on to the actual interview. Consequently, it takes a very long time just to reach that interview stage. It is quite tough. That is why you really need to prepare yourself thoroughly and carefully. It is not as simple as just graduating from a prestigious school like the University of Tokyo or Keio University, or even a famous overseas university, and then automatically receiving a job offer. When it comes to the actual interviews, I think they can be broadly divided into two categories: behavioral questions and technical questions. The behavioral interviews are quite similar to the higher view process I mentioned earlier, involving questions like, what exactly would you do in this specific situation? Of course, there are also the basic questions like self-introductions, self-promotion, your specific reasons for applying, and so on. You absolutely need to be able to answer these as a matter of course. But unfortunately, the reality is that most students cannot even answer these basic questions properly. For example, they often cannot even explain clearly why they want to work in investment banking in the first place. A very common answer is something generic like M&A is very dynamic, or I want to work for the sake of the Japanese economy. But often what is missing is the personal reason why they actually want to do it. For example, if you write for the Japanese economy, is that really the truth? Do you really want to do it that badly in your heart? Or why do you truly want to do it in the first place? If you really wanted to do it, you would have done something in the past, right? If you say it's for the Japanese economy, but you haven't actually done anything, or if you're just vaguely interested in M&A because it seems interesting, that's going to be tough. You won't get a job offer with that. If your motivation for applying or your self-promotion is weak, people will think you haven't really thought things through. Everyone knows you'll definitely be asked about your motivation and self-promotion, so if you show up unprepared, they'll wonder why you didn't get ready for such obvious questions. That's the classic sign of someone who can't do the job. If you can't even prepare your motivation and self-promotion by the deadline, that's a problem. People will just think you can't do the job, right? Do you really think top companies like Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, or Millennium would hire students like that? That's the question. But the reality is, most students can't answer these questions. That's such a waste, and I think most people don't really know how to prepare or even realize that their logic is weak. So it's really a shame. That's why I encourage you to come to Alpha for a mock interview. Even if it's just to ask, what do you think of my motivation for applying? That's totally fine. I want you to come and find out where you stand. Right now, most of you are self-grading and giving yourselves a 95 out of 100. But when it comes to the real test, you end up scoring less than 10. That's the situation you're in, and it's extremely risky. It's only once you know where you currently stand that you can figure out what kind of studying or preparation you need to do, just like with entrance exams. But when it comes to job hunting, most people just kind of wing it without doing that. People tend to self-assess and think this kind of self-promotion or motivation statement should be fine because that's what it said online, and then just go for it based on that reasoning. But then they end up getting grilled in interviews and fail, which is honestly such a waste. So I really think it's important to prepare properly so that doesn't happen. Now, when it comes to behavioral or technical questions, that's something you deal with after you've cleared the basic questions. Assuming you've cleared those and come to Alpha and prepared properly, you'll be asked about technical topics like DCF, comps, LBO models, WAC, beta, and for some people, even gamma. You'll be asked about their definitions, accounting definitions, and so on. Lately, there's also been a lot of questions about the real market. For example, what do you think about this M&A deal? Or what do you think about this investment case? So it's important to study both the academic side, like CFA or securities analyst material, and also keep up with what's happening in the real-time market. These two things are crucial. Most of the time, people are missing one or the other. Especially smart or high-achieving students, they might be studying for the CFA, securities analyst exams, or bookkeeping level 2, and have solid accounting knowledge. They can answer questions about DCF definitions, but they can't recommend any stocks. If you end up like that, it gives the impression that you're not really interested, and that's not good. So you should avoid half-hearted preparation. It's really important to thoroughly prepare for both sides. And to go even further, if you find it a bit painful or tough to keep up with financial information, or if researching M&A feels like a hassle, then honestly, maybe the finance industry isn't the right fit for you. In that case, there are other options like operations or back office and middle office roles. So I think it's a good idea to figure out your own suitability for these areas as you go along. In summary, even though we just talked about interviews in general terms, I hope you understand that there are actually many different types of interviews. Next, something that a lot of people tend to overlook is internships. With internships, for example, at Boston Career Forum, Carry, the application process usually starts around August, and then in September, October, and November, you have interviews or higher view screenings. And on the actual day of Carry in Boston, you might be told, congratulations, you have an internship offer. But I think it's really important not to assume that getting an internship means you automatically have a job offer. The key point here is that even if you participate in an internship, it's actually not that uncommon to end up not getting the offer in the end. This happens more often than you might think. So when it comes to internships, think of it as the final interview. The last hurdle has gotten a lot tougher recently. For example, for overseas university students graduating in 2028, you'll probably go through the Boscary process this November. The offer you get in November is just for the internship. So you get an internship offer in November 2026, then you actually participate in the summer internship between June and August 2027. If you perform well there, that's when you get the full-time offer. Please keep that flow in mind. So while internships are still a bit further down the line, it's a really important part, so I hope you'll pay close attention. These days, internships are usually about 8 to 10 weeks long. That's already pretty intense, right? At places like Goldman Sachs, you work for 8 to 10 weeks and get evaluated from every angle: how you work, how you approach tasks, your communication style, even your personality. They look at everything. And over those 10 weeks, you're really pushed to your limits, both physically and mentally. They want to see how you handle being under pressure. Do you complain? Do you give up? Or do you dig in and keep pushing? That's what they're really watching for. With interviews, even a super day is just 2 or 3 hours, maybe 6 hours at most. But with an internship, you're being observed for 10 weeks straight, so there's nowhere to hide. After working for 10 weeks, if the people at top firms like Goldman Sachs or BlackRock don't think, wow, this person is amazing, we definitely want them to work here, then it's not going to happen. In the end, it all comes down to fit. Even people from top schools get rejected because they can't handle this 10-week, 360-degree evaluation. At some point, they might think, this person isn't really suited for client-facing roles, or maybe they're not a good fit for our company, or they're not professional enough. That's the kind of thing they're looking for. So it's really important to build up your true abilities so you don't let those weaknesses show. That's why at Alpha, we focused on this. Even something as simple as how you write your daily emails is important, and having the right mindset is crucial. The reason I always say that the people who ultimately get job offers are genuinely good people is because of this. I mean, it's tough, right? You're being watched for 10 weeks by people like John Joyce, constantly scrutinized. Like, what kind of person is this? And you have to be able to withstand that pressure. Only then will they say, okay, this person is great, let's give them an offer. So your character really matters. It's not enough to just be smart or have financial knowledge. I always emphasize that point. The real benefit, though it sounds a bit cheap to call it a benefit, of Alpha's support is right here. We help you fundamentally update your mindset, your core way of thinking, your thought processes, and your approach to work. Basically, how a professional operates. As a result, your work quality and your way of thinking naturally reach a Goldman Sachs level. That's why, even during internships, you'll be evaluated as someone who stands out from other students. This might be hard to fully convey just through a video, so I really encourage you to get personalized coaching. So I hope you'll reach out for a consultation about this. So what I want to say with this slide is, first of all, it's not just about the internship or the interview being the end of the process. Just because you pass the interview doesn't mean you're done. Especially in finance, you really need to keep that in mind. Also, internships are where your weaknesses really show. Since your weaknesses will come out, only truly genuine talent will make it through. Basically, unless you're truly a good person, you won't get a job offer. That's something I wanted to make sure to mention. That's what I think. So that's the explanation up to this point. Now, I'd like to hear what you all think, your impressions, or anything else. You probably thought, wow, this is tough. And honestly, I do think it's pretty difficult. It's definitely gotten harder compared to 5 or 10 years ago. The selection process for finance jobs has also become really tough. It's gotten harder, and the quality of the questions they ask is really something. And when it comes to the final internships, it truly is the last hurdle. Since it comes down to that final stage, I think it turns into a pretty tough battle. So, this is a slide about why you should choose Alpha. The reason Alpha has been able to support and produce so many successful candidates is not just because we help with immediate things like interview prep or writing your application essays. It's because we go deeper, working on your way of thinking, your mindset, even how you approach work. Sometimes we even start from basics like how to write emails or use polite language. We help you change things from the ground up. From a student mindset to a professional one, you can really grow into a true professional. That's a huge part of it. At least that's how I see it. I think that's a big difference compared to other job hunting prep schools. Of course, the know-how is there too. It's pretty intense, you know? I mean, I used to work at a hedge fund, and as for our CEO, Rasumi-san, he's a real winner. He's got an MBA from Chicago and worked in Goldman's IBD, so he's built a top-tier career that anyone would envy. So with someone like that, we can raise everyone up to that first-class standard. As a result, you'll be able to win. So when it comes to know-how, quality, and even the essence of things, the quality is on a whole different level. That's why you should leave this kind of thing to Alpha, whether it's the approach or how to land a job offer. We'll teach you everything, so please feel free to consult with us. And one more thing, it's not just about the number of weeks that matters. Like I mentioned earlier, you really have to go after each spec individually. It's pretty common that you have to do that. To be blunt, for example, people from March or Kansai Kankan Doryutsu universities, they're talented, but just not quite at the level to get into foreign investment banks. For example, we support them in studying abroad at overseas graduate schools, like in financial engineering. We have them attend top graduate schools, and on top of that, they get both the study abroad and job hunting experience. The fact that we can offer both of those things, that's really something only Alpha can do. That's why we offer support for things like studying abroad and job hunting. We can provide total support, including everything up to your future career. So I really think we're the only ones who can do this kind of thing. Here's the summary of today's discussion about spec. But from the spec screening all the way to the final internship, they really put you through a lot of challenges and pressure. So let's make sure you're able to handle that in this industry. So you really need to get serious about this. That's why we're saying you should start preparing from your freshman year of college. We just want to make that clear to you, even though it might seem a little intimidating. I get it. You might be thinking, this sounds tough, or they're really asking a lot. Some of you might be feeling that way. But please don't worry, it's really okay. When it comes to foreign financial institutions or investment banks, there are people who get job offers at places everyone envies, like asset management firms, hedge funds, traders, or research departments. But that doesn't mean they were super talented from the start. Actually, everyone starts from the same place. From there, they worked hard and stuck with Alpha. They followed the advice sincerely and put it into practice. By doing that, they kept growing and eventually ended up at places like Goldman or BlackRock, where everyone dreams of working. So they ended up getting job offers from places like BlackRock and similar companies, which really shows that anyone has a chance. I'm not just saying this to make you feel better, it's something I truly believe from the bottom of my heart. Yes, and I'll teach you exactly how to do it, step by step. Alpha has a proven track record, so you can trust us. Just come to us. We'll tell you everything you need to know to get a job offer and support you with everything we've got, so you'll be in good hands. So even if you're worried about your academic background, your English skills, not being in tech, or not having a finance background, or if you feel like your communication skills aren't great, even if you feel like you can't get any offers at all, it's totally fine. Please feel free to consult with Alpha. Yes, please, feel free to let us know about your current situation. So, everyone, we look forward to hearing from you through our free consultation. Don't hesitate to reach out. No matter what your situation is, it's totally fine. Even if it's like this, but you still want to do your best, something like that is totally okay. If you reach out to us, we'll be happy to explain how to go about things, so please don't hesitate to contact us. So today, we've covered a complete strategy for company financing. So up until now, we've talked about how you can partially get into foreign investment banks. We've also discussed things like stock pitches for getting into graduate school or foreign investment banks. And I think we've covered topics like financial technicals, interview strategies, and how to craft your reasons for applying and your self-promotion. However, I don't think we've ever really explained everything in total altogether. So that's why I decided to make this kind of video today. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'm open to any questions or consultations from you all. I'm always here and ready to hear from you anytime. Well then, I'll end things here. Thank you very much.